What we're looking at in Santa Clara right now is bigger than just draft prep. This is one of those moments where the 49ers decide whether they're going to attack this Super Bowl window like killers or manage it like everybody else. Today's stories are not small. They point to pressure, opportunity, and the kind of calls that separate a loaded roster from a ruthless franchise. If you ride with the Niners with real emotion, stay with me, because this is a contender conversation. Now let's get to what really matters, because this last wave of pre-draft visits is not decoration, not social media theater, and not smoke to distract the fan base. When the 49ers bring in Caleb Lomu and McClellan at this stage, the message is obvious. This team knows exactly where the pressure points are, and exactly where it cannot afford to miss. And I'm going to say it the way it needs to be said. If San Francisco goes into this draft without treating the offensive line and defensive line like top-level priorities, then it is playing games with its own title window. Caleb Lomu is not part of this conversation by accident. His name keeps popping up in first-round projections, and that makes all the sense in the world when you look at the situation honestly. Trent Williams is still a force. He still changes games. He still changes how an offense feels. But time does not slow down for anybody. He turns 38 in July. A serious team, a team that expects to matter in January, does not wait until urgency turns into panic. If Lomu is being viewed internally as a tackle who can learn behind a legend and eventually take over, then this visit means a whole lot more than a routine check-in. This is about protecting the future of the offense, and that kind of decision has to be handled with real conviction. And there's more to it. Lomu was a 2-year starter at Utah. This is not some random name built on empty hype. There's experience there. There's responsibility there. There's real material to work with. And sure, trying to line up a successor for a player like Trent is never easy. It almost feels unfair. But the bigger mistake is avoiding that conversation because it feels uncomfortable. The front office has to face it head on. It has to be willing to think 2 steps ahead without losing its edge in the present. On the other side, McClellan points right at another issue this roster has to attack. The defensive line cannot be built on hope, talk, and wishful thinking. If this team wants to get back to being violent up front, it needs more size, more rotation, more aggression, and more actual production. McClellan comes in with day 2 or early day 3 value, 6 sacks last season at Missouri, and 2 years as a starter. That does not guarantee stardom, but it does point to real usefulness, real physicality, and a real chance to become part of a rotation that makes life miserable snap after snap. With 6 total picks, including number 27 overall, 1 second-rounder, and 4 fourth-rounders, the 49ers have enough ammo to come out of this draft tougher, deeper, and better built for war. What they cannot do is get cute, chase window dressing, or act like the trenches are some secondary issue. Because for real contenders, it starts there. And if you forget that, you pay for it later. The second story is the kind that makes the whole fan base stop and ask one question. If this even becomes remotely possible, are you going to move like a giant or freeze because the price is scary? Because now the name connected to the 49ers is Myles Garrett, and that alone changes the temperature. We are not talking about some quiet roster tweak. We are talking about a player who, if he ever actually becomes available out of Cleveland, could change the ceiling of a franchise the second he puts on another uniform. And the fit with San Francisco makes way too much sense. Daniel Jeremiah got right to the point when he said Garrett looks like he was built to play in the 49ers scheme. And honestly, there's not much to overthink here. Put Myles Garrett on one side and Nick Bosa on the other, and now you are talking about something that changes offensive game plans, changes quarterback nights, and changes how opponents walk into the stadium. That would not just be talent, that would be fear. That would be a defensive front that can wreck big games without needing desperate blitzes just to create pressure. Now sure, a conversation like this is never just about the dream. The price would be massive. It should be. A player like that is not available for a discount, not moved in some light package, and not acquired because somebody sounded interested. If Cleveland ever opened the door, the bidding would get serious fast, with premium picks and maybe even players involved. But this is exactly where I want to push hard. The 49ers cannot keep acting like every major market swing is automatically too much. Sometimes the real mistake is not attacking. Sometimes the real overcorrection is being too conservative while the championship window is wide open. Garrett is the kind of talent that justifies discomfort. He justifies hard conversations. He justifies structural change. Because the return is not theoretical. You are buying instant impact, pocket destruction, chaos for the offense, and a defense that could become feared again in a very real way. And if anybody thinks that would be some luxury move, they are reading this moment all wrong. Luxury is hoping everything breaks right, while your biggest rivals carry more firepower than you do. If this scenario ever starts to feel real, San Francisco needs to come at it with real aggression. Not blind recklessness, but hunger. Because a contender that sees an opportunity like that and decides to sit back is not being wise, it is being small. And the 49ers, with this standard and this pressure, do not get to think small. The third story takes the draft conversation into uncomfortable territory. Because every time people talk about pick 27, the discussion almost always lands on the trenches or wide receiver. But now another idea is picking up steam. Safety. And before anybody rolls their eyes on instinct, take a second and look at the full picture. This is not random. This is not somebody trying to be clever. This is about need, scheme, and the reality that a new coordinator can reshape the identity of a defense fast. Raheem Morris changes this conversation a lot. His track record shows exactly how much he values a strong safety pairing, and the example people keep pointing to is what he had in Atlanta with Jesse Bates III and Xavier Watts. When a coach has seen firsthand what smart, rangy, playmaking safeties can do for a defense, he does not treat that position like a patch job. He treats it like structure. And that is where Emmanuel McNeil-Warren enters the 49ers' radar in a much more serious way than some people want to admit. If the board gets weird and some of the trench or receiver names are gone, McNeil-Warren could become one of those picks that makes part of the fan base uncomfortable at first, then makes more and more sense the deeper you dig into the profile. We are talking about a safety who is nearly 6'4", around 208 pounds, with strong coverage instincts, real field awareness, and a presence that jumps off the tape. The 4.52 in the 40 is not some eye-popping testing number, fine. But not every defender has to win the combine spreadsheet to change a game. Some guys process so fast they play faster than the stopwatch says, and that is exactly the case people make for him. Is there risk? Of course there is. The level of competition at Toledo is going to come up, just like it always does with prospects outside the biggest programs. The top-end athletic burst is not going to blow people away either. But that is not really the question. The question is whether he brings enough range, intelligence, and upside to fit what Morris wants to build. And in certain draft scenarios, that matters a lot. Jair Brown and Malik Mustafa give this defense a respectable base, but there is still a missing piece here. The 49ers still need more impact, more range, and more of that back-end presence that changes how a coordinator calls the game. Talanoa Hufanga left a real mark on this defense, emotionally and functionally. And going after someone who can restore some of that energy is not overthinking it. It is competitive reality. If McNeil-Warren is sitting there and the 49ers truly believe in the projection, then maybe the boldest move is to sprint the card in before somebody else does it for them. And now we get to a story that hits pride, frustration, and that part of the fan base that is completely out of patience with a messy situation. Because the picture around Brandon Aiyuk is getting clearer by the day. The 49ers look ready to take just about any exit that keeps this from ending in a straight release. And honestly, after everything this relationship turned into, nobody in Santa Clara should be acting shocked. When even a proposed deal built around a conditional 6th-round pick in 2027 starts sounding appealing, that tells you this is not just urgency anymore. This is total wear and tear. This is a franchise trying to pull out some kind of value before a door finally comes off the hinges. The possible Titans angle makes sense for one simple reason. If anybody is willing to take this gamble now, the Niners are probably saying yes without much hesitation. Robert Saleh, after that short reunion with San Francisco in 2025 before leaving for another head coaching shot, could be that unlikely connection. And from Tennessee's side, there is at least some football logic. Cam Ward is young. He needs reliable targets. And Aiyuk, even coming off the major knee injury from 2024, is still young enough to rebuild value. He is only 28. He went over 1,000 yards in both 2022 and 2023. The talent did not disappear. The problem is that the full package now comes loaded with doubt, a rough recent history, and a lot of broken trust. And that is where this gets tough for the 49ers fan base. Because even if trying to trade him makes sense, the market is not stupid. Around the league, plenty of teams are probably looking at Aiyuk right now as damaged goods. Not just because of the injury, but because of how badly things unraveled in San Francisco. And when even Washington, which looked like an obvious landing spot for a while, seems to be signaling no real interest, the picture gets even harsher. A lot of teams may be waiting for the 49ers to finally run out of options, release him, and let somebody else sign him to a short prove-it deal without giving up anything at all. If Tennessee wants to jump that line, great for San Francisco. That would almost feel like a favor. But the hard truth is that the 49ers are trying to avoid walking out of this whole thing with empty hands and even more damage attached to the situation. So let me throw this straight to the fan base. If that offer really showed up, a conditional 6th in 2027, are you taking it immediately just to end the headache, or does that feel way too low for a player who used to be such an important part of this offense? The picture in Santa Clara today is heavy but simple. The 49ers are staring at decisions that demand control, strong reads, and the guts to act before the door closes. Draft visits are showing where the pressure is building. A massive name tied to the market turns up the ambition. The safety debate makes it obvious this defense could still change dramatically with one firm decision. And the Aiyuk situation is a reminder that not every problem solves itself if you wait long enough. This is not the time for hesitation. This is the time to move like a franchise that refuses to waste a Super Bowl window. If that same urgency lives in you, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell, because tomorrow, the pressure is still on.